We begin today the Gemara on Daf Dalid, right at the beginning of the Amud Minolan. The Gemara comes back to the halacha of the Mishnah regarding the halacha of shechting and doing the avodas of a carbon lishma, or at least not to do it shaloi lishma, which invalidates the carbon. But actually, the Mishnah said that only two of the karbanis, chatas and pesach, will actually invalidate the carbon itself. Regarding all other karbanis, it will still be kosher, but le'olu le'baylam l'shem chayva, the person is not yotzes chiyuv. But even if it doesn't invalidate the carbon, but lechatchila, all karbanis have to be brought without this kavan of shalei lishma. Has to be lishma. So what is the source of this inyan? And as Rashi says here, and the Gemara will point this out all the way at the end of this whole discussion, that we're looking for a source for all the avodas where it must be done lishma. As we'll see here in the continuation of the Gemara, there are four avodas of the karbanis that must be done lishma: the shchita, the kabbalah sadam, receiving of the blood, the halacha, bringing the blood to the mizbeach, and then the zrika, and the spraying of the blood on the mizbeach. So for each one of these aspects of the aveda, there's a source needed to tell us that it must be done lishma. So the Gemara, minal and the bina zvicha lishma. How do you know that the shchita, the zvicha, is when you shech the carbon, that it should be done for the sake of this carbon and not for another carbon? The Amakra, the pasuk says, vim zevach shlomim karbonai. So it could have said in the pasuk vim shlomim karbonai. Why does it add the word zevach? Zevach means shetei zvicha l'shem shlomim. The word zvicha goes on the shechting. So the zvicha should be for the sake of the shlomim. In fact, the Gemara, how do you know that word zevach is an extra word that's teaching me this? V'dilma hainu shmayu. Maybe that is just the name of the carbon, just like shlomim is the name of the carbon. Maybe zevach shlomim. It has two words as the name of the carbon. And says the Gemara, no, we know that that's not the name of the carbon, because there's another pasuk where it says, hamakriv is dam hashlamim. You're bringing the blood of the shlamim. So it doesn't say dam zevach hashlamim. So we see that really shlamim itself is the name of this carbon. So that's the source for the shechting that has to be done l'shem the shlamim, l'shma. Another pasuk the Gemara brings, hazayrik is dam hashlamim. So it says in the pasuk over here as well, dam of the shlamim. Like siv zevach. It doesn't mention the word zevach at all. And here it adds that word zevach shmamina shetei zvicha l'shem shlamim. So the shchita, which is what the zvicha is, has to be for the sake of the shlamim. So ashkechan zvicha, this is the source regarding the shchita that has to be done for the sake of the shlamim. Shar avodas minolam. What's the source regarding the other avodas that follow after this? Now, if you'll say leilef mizvicha, once I see the Torah requires that it should be l'shma for the shchita, I should say that the other avodas are learned from this. But you can't learn out from the shchita. Why not? Because there's a certain stringency we find only by shchita. Mal zvicha, if you look at the shechting of a carbon, and I find shekain paiseles, that's the Bach says, shekain paiseles l'shem shaloi l'shem oichlin bepesach. Specifically by a carbon pesach, if you shech the carbon pesach for a person that cannot eat from it, let's say the person is too old or he's not able to eat from the carbon pesach, so then the shchita is going to be pasul. This is a unique halacha by the carbon pesach, and it's learned from the lashon of the pasuk ish lefi ochloi, that you have to at least be able to eat a kazayas from the carbon, that the shchita should be kosher. And this is going to passel only the shchita, because over there in that pasuk where it says ish lefi ochloi, it says tachoisu alaseh, and tachoisu, she brings there from the Gemara and Psachim, it refers to the shchita. So I find that by shchita there's this unique chumrah that by pesach it has to be shechted l'shem a person that can eat a kazayas. I don't see this chumrah by the other avodas that follow. So I can't learn out from the din of l'shma by shchita to the other avodas. Therefore the Gemara says, Ela makra, by the other avodas, the sources follow. So the Gemara starts first with the kabbalah of the dam, which is the next thing, the next avodah after the shchita. So the pasuk says, hamakriv as dam hashlamim, he's being makriv, the blood of the shlamim. The makriv here in the pasuk comes right after the shchita, and therefore it refers to receiving the blood. The pasuk could have said hamakriv is damai, it's blood. It's talking about the shlamim. It says hadam hashlamim shetehei kabbalah l'shem shlamim. You receive the blood; it has to be for the sake of the shlamim. So for the Gemara, so v'lichtav rachmana beKabbalah, let the Torah teach us the din of l'shma only here regarding receiving the blood. V'leilev shchita mina. And I could learn from it that the shchita should also be l'shma. Why do we need a separate pasuk for the shchita? The answer is Mishum Dekel Mifrach, because I would refute this limud, and I would say Mala Kabbalah, when it comes to receiving the blood, you know why here it requires the Shema, because there's a stringency. Shekain Psula Bizar. This is something that cannot be done by a non-Kayan, and the Isha, or a woman as well. Some take out Isha, because Zar is including an Isha as well. Unlike by Shechita though, Shechting could be done even by anybody else, by a Zar as well. So therefore we have a separate pasuk for the Shechita, and for the Kabbalah, the receiving of the blood. So Ashkechan Shechita v'Kabbalah, so I have a source for the Shema, both by Shechita and the Kabbalah. Zrika minalan, what is the source for the spraying of the blood? That it also has to be done the Shema. Now, if you would argue and say, Leileif Mahani, learn out from these two that we just said, from the Shechita and the Kabbalah. But I can tell you can't learn from there. They have their stringency. Malahani, by both of these, they are stringent. Shekain to unais tzafain. They're both done by kotche kotchem. It's done by the tzafan of the mizbeach specifically, and the yeshnon b'chatois apnimiyes. And it's applicable that the shechita would be done for a carbon where the blood is sprayed inside, and the receiving of the blood is for the purpose of bringing it inside the base of mikdash. And these two chumres do not apply by the zrika that we're talking about over here, the zrika on the mizbeach achitzin. There's no Indian of tzafin regarding that, and it's tafka on the mizbeach outside. So how do we know that the zrika on the mizbeach outside the mizbeach achitzin, that this has to be done l'shma as well? So hello makra, there's a separate pasuk for that. Hazayrik, the pasuk the Gemara quoted before. Hazayrik is dam hashlamim. Could have said you're spraying its blood. It says dam hashlamim shetehei zrika l'shem shlamim. That the zrika as well has to be done for the sake of this carbon shlamim. So now the Gemara asks, why wouldn't the Torah write this din of the Shema only by the Zrike, v'leilef mina, and I can learn from the Zrike for the other Avedis that they have to be the Shema? Answer is Mishum Dekel Mifrach, because Zrike also has its unique Chumrah. I can tell you, Mal Zrike Shekain Chayev Aleh Zar Misa. By the Zrike specifically, if a Zar does the Aveda of the Zrike is the main kapara of a carbon. If a Zar does the Aveda of the Zrike, he's going to be Chayiv Misa. That doesn't apply by Shechita, which is totally kosher to be done by anybody. And even by the Kabbalah, which a Zar is not supposed to do, but it's not Misa. The halach of Misa, Rashi, he brings from the Gemara in Yuma, that it's learned out from the Lashon of the Pasuk where it says, V'azara korev Yumas v'avadetem. The Gemara Darshans v'avadetem means Aveda Tama. Only an Aveda which is a completion. Not the Kabbalah, the Halacha, which is you're not completing it. Dafke here, the Zrika on the Mizbeach, that is the Aveda, which is Misa. So therefore, this is a stringency by Zrika that I can't learn out to the other cases. So Ashkecha and Kulu. So we have the source for the other Avedas here. So now we have the Shechita, the Kabbalah, and the Zrika. Halacha minalan, but the halacha, which is bringing the blood to the mizbeach, from where do I know that? That's also it's an aveda. It's not just a technical thing that because you're distant from the mizbeach, so you have to bring it. But the halacha itself is an aveda for itself, and this has to be done lishma as well, l'chatchila. So v'chi teime. Now, if you'll argue and say leilef mikulu, let's learn out the halacha from the others. You can't, because malakulu sheken aveda she efshel levatla. All other avedas, there's no option that you will not have to do it. However, when it comes to bringing the blood to Mizbeach, when you have to do it, it's Hakan Aveda. But it's possible that you shouldn't have to do it, because if you shech the carbon right near the Mizbeach, so right there, you're standing there and you spray the blood on the Mizbeach without delivering it, bringing it to the Mizbeach. So therefore, this is a different quality of an Aveda. So you can't learn out from the others. So Ella, says the Gemara, the source for halacha l'shma is also from a separate pasuk. So now Amakra, there's a pasuk that says, now this is not mamish the source, but first the Gemara shows you that there's another pasuk where it says v'hikriv esakayla mizbecha, that you'll be makriv everything on the mizbeach. Now what does this term v'hikriv in this pasuk mean? V'amamar, the master explained that the term v'hikriv here means zu halachas evarim lakevesh. This is bringing the limbs of the carbon to the ramp of the mizbeach. So even though it says the term vehikriv, but vehikriv means the halacha. It means bringing it to the mizbeach. And now this is not what we're talking about. We're talking actually about the halacha of the dam that has to be lishma. But there's a pasuk where it says that vehikrivai means the halacha of the evarim lekevesh. Now, coming back to the blood, bringing the blood to the mizbeach, the Tanya, it says in a braise that there's another pasuk where it says vehikrivai that the pasuk there is speaking about the blood, because it says in the pasuk v'shachat es ben habakar lefnei Hashem. That's the beginning of the pasuk. You shecht, and then the pasuk goes on to say v'hikrivo b'nei Aaron hakainim. So when it says v'hikrivo, what does v'hikrivo mean? Zu kabbalas adam. V'hikrivo, since it says it right after the shechita, it really is referring to receiving the blood, the kabbalah. But now the question is, we just brought before that the term v'hikriv regarding the limbs does not mean to receive. Regarding the limbs, it means to bring, to deliver to the mizbeach. So over here, in this pasuk, when it says v'ikrivu means receiving the blood, because it's right after the shechita. But why would the pasuk use the term v'ikrivu regarding the receiving the blood, if v'ikrivu is usually a term that's used when it's talking about delivering to the mizbeach? So this is our source. So what we say is, v'afkar achmana lekabbalah, that's what the Bachir says, v'afkar achmana lekabbalah b'lashon haylacha, the Torah speaks about receiving the blood, and it uses the term of the hikrivu, which is a term that's usually used for delivering the blood, lememre, in order to teach you this point there, the halacha le'tafka meklal kabbalah, that delivering the blood is not different than the halacha of receiving the blood. Just like by receiving the blood, it must be lishma. Delivering the blood is included in the same halacha of the hikrivu, that it has to be lishma. Therefore, we have a separate source for the halacha of the dam, that it also has to be done lishma.
So which word we're learning out halacha? From which word?
This word v'hikrivu. This word v'hikrivu. Even though v'hikrivu means Kabbalah, but the Torah uses the term v'hikrivu, which usually means halacha, to tell you that the halacha should have the same halacha like the Kabbalah Sadam, that has to be lishma.
The way we learn out in this pasuk, the Kabbalah Sadam.
Not
the shema, but that's the inyan of Kabbalah Sadam.
That's from the context of the pasuk, because it says v'shachat, and right afterwards v'hikrivu. So the first thing right after the shechita is the Kabbalah. That's just from the context. So this is the source for the 4 avodas that has to be done lishma. And which lishma are we talking about? L'shem this carbon, not l'shem another carbon. It says the Gemara v'ashkachan shini kodesh. So we have now the source for shini kodesh, that you should not change the kavanah of lishma to another carbon. That's called shini kodesh. If I bring a shlomim, for example, and I think that it's l'shem oila, I brought it with a kavanah l'shem a different kodesh, a different carbon. Shinui baila min alam, but then there's a different din. That when you shecht it must be shechted l'shem this person that's getting the kapara, not for someone else. You might already brought on Daf Beis, Amid Beis, the l'shem shishit dvarim hazavach nisbach le'chatchila, you have to bring the carbon thinking that it's for this person. So where do we know this halacha? And here the Gemara is also going to bring a source for all the 4 avodas that it has to be with this kavana. The pasuk says, "Ubisar zevach taidas shlomov," the meat of the zevach of the taida of its shlomim. So this is extra here when it says zevach taidas shlomov. What is this coming to say? Shetehei zviche, the word zevach, which is extra, it's saying that the shechita of this carbon taida should be l'shem taida. Shechtet l'shem this carbon, which is the taida. Now the thing is, this limud is extra. The fact that a shechita of every carbon has to be l'shem that carbon itself, we just said that. We learned it before from the zevach shlomim. Why is it saying here again zevach taida shlomov? So therefore, we darshan as follows: if this pasuk is not needed for this point to say that it has to be shechted l'shem the taida, not l'shem another carbon, because the nafkalam hasam, we learned it out from the pasuk vim zevach shlomim. Taneu inyan l'sheni bailam. So we say that it must be adding another kind of lishma, and that is that it should be for this person that's bringing this carbon, not for someone else. This is a concept the Gemara many times employs. If there's something extra, so that it's not applicable for what it actually says, it's applicable for an additional point, which is here the idea of shili bailam. Okay, but is that what this extra pasuk is coming to teach? But this pasuk, there's a brayso that learns something else from it. Look at the Tanya, it says in the brayso, "Bisar zevach toidas shlomov abachon noimer mishum rabelazar." What this pasuk is coming to say is toida sheshachta l'shem shlomim ksheira. When you shechta toida and you're having in mind that you're shechting a shlomim, it's actually kosher. And the reason is because it's also a shlomim. A toida is a kind of shlomim. And that's what the pasuk here is saying. Zevach toidas shlomov, that it is a shlomim as well. However, shlamim sheshachtam l'shem taida. When you shech the shlamim and you're thinking that it's a taida, so that is actually psula or psulim, because the psula refers to the person, that it's not going to be oila for him l'shem chayva. It's not really a psul in the carbon itself. But the point is that this is a kavana shalei l'shma, because a shlamim is not a type of taida. So if you're shechting the shlamim for the taida, it's going to be pasul. So that's what we learn from this pasuk where it says Taidas Shlamav, that a taida is a kind of shlamim. So how are we saying that this is an extra pasuk to teach me this halacha and a Indian to say that you have to have the kavanah l'shma for this bailim that are bringing this carbon? Oh, so the Gemara explains Ma hefresh ben zelizeh. What is the difference between these two kavanas of shalei l'shma? Taida kruya shlamim. Every taida is also called a shlamim. But ve'ein shlamim kruya taida. You can't say about every shlamim that it's also called a taida. And says the Gemara, no, there's another word here that's extra. Anan, what are we learning out from? Mizevach ka'amrinon, or the other Gersa adds it, Mizevach taidas ka'amrinon. That word zevach is extra. You could have said, Ubisar taidas shlomov. Taidas shlomov makes the point that a taida is a kind of shlomim. That word zevach there is extra. So from that I learned that has to be shechted l'shma, and this is an additional din of l'shma, which is l'shem de bailim. But that word zevach, which is extra, is also darshan for something else. I still learn out from this later here in the Masechta that chatos v'osham minayin. The Gemara asks, how do I know regarding the chatos and the osham that what this is talking about is regarding the timing of eating the carbon. By a toida, you could only eat the carbon for one day and the following night. How do I know that by a chatos and a osham has the same din that you can only eat it for one day and the following night? Tamad leima zevach. That extra word of zevach teaches me that there's another carbon that's similar to the taida, and it's the chatas and the asham that you can eat for one day and a night. So the word zevach is also not extra. But the Gemara says, you're right, it's not extra, but the order of the pasuk shows it there's another drasha here. Why? Because imkain, if it's just coming to add the chatas and the asham, so then nichtiv kra, the pasuk should say, ubisar taida shlama, and then afterwards add the word zevach. And then it would come and say, that if you look here at the pasuk, ubisar taida shlama of zevach, so the pasuk goes on to say, b'yoyim karbana ye'achal ye'nich menad beiker. It says it could only be eaten on that day. So if the word zevach that you're adding is only coming to darshan regarding the timing of the eating, so then the zevach should come after it says ubisar taida shlama, and then zevach would be referring to that additional carbon that you could only eat on that day. But my zevach taidas, why does it put the word zevach before? So over here it sounds like we're not talking only about an additional carbon. Zevach over here means the shchita of this carbon. So that's coming to say, Shma Mino Tarti, we can learn 2 points. The word zevach is extra, but also the order of where the pasuk puts it teaches me this additional halacha that there's a new din of lishma, and that adds the din of lishma, l'shem, the bailim, when you shech the carbon. Says the Gemara, so over here as well, you're going to have to learn out this din of shini bailim, that you can't change your kavanah for a different bailim regarding each detail, all the 4 avedas. So ashkachan zvicha, we see this halacha of shini bailim regarding the shechita of the carbon. Shar avedas minalan, how do I know that this applies similar by the other avedas as well? If you would argue to say to learn from zvicha, if the Torah requires zvicha to be lishma, so the other avedas as well. But we already refuted this from before. The Gemara brought the svara that zvicha has a certain chumrah. Mal zvicha shekem paisel l'shem oichlem bepesach, shaloi l'shem oichlem bepesach. When you bring a carbon pesach and you're bringing it for someone that can't eat a kazayis, so that specifically by shchita it passes the carbon. So you can't learn from the shchita. Says the Gemara, maybe I could learn out as follows. Nemra zvicha b'sheni kodesh. I see that the Torah says that you have to shecht l'shma and not change with a kavana for another carbon. V'nemra zvicha b'sheni bailam. And we have the word zvicha that we brought that proves that you can't shecht l'shem a different bailam. So I compare the two. Ma zvicha mora b'sheni kodesh, just like this that we see that you have to shecht for this carbon. Lo yichilakta bein zvicha l'shar avedes. It's not only by the shechita. We don't make a distinction. The other 3 avedas as well, the same halacha applies. It has to be l'shem this carbon. So av zvicha mura b'shini bailem. So too regarding the zvicha that we're saying that it must be shecht for this owner. Lo tachlik bem zvicha l'shar avedas. I don't make a distinction between the zvicha and the other avedas as well that it has to be done for this bailem. So I could compare. I could learn out from here to the other avedas as well, just like it is b'negei to shini kodesh. The same applies to the shini bailam. But the Gemara says you can't compare these two because this whole entire concept, this comparison between the Shalei Lishma of Shini Kodesh and the Shalei Lishma of Shini Bailim, there's a big chumrah that you find by Shini Kodesh that's not applicable by Shini Bailim. So Ikele Mifrach, you can refute this, and here the Gemara is going to bring 4 svaras, 4 chumras that you find by the Shalei Lishma when you're having in mind another carbon, that you don't find these 4 chumras by Shini Bailim when you're having in mind for a different person. When it comes to the kavan of Shalei Lishma for another carbon, shekain. So number 1, the Bachir says psuloi begufai. This is a psul which is in the guf of the animal. Right, so the way this is understood is when you're thinking l'shem another carbon, even though it's not mamisha actual psul physically in the carbon itself, but it's a machshave in relation to this identity of what this carbon is. Then instead of it being for a shlamim, you're thinking that it's for an ayla. So that's called a psul begufay. Whereas the kavana shaloi l'shem bailim, that's not in relation to the identity of the carbon. That's regarding the person that's getting the kapara. So that's not called a psul begufay. So therefore it's not as stringent. And another thing is v'yeshnon ba'arba avodas, and the kavana of Shalei Lishma. Oh, so this is here a unique din that we'll learn later in the Perek over here, that there's a big difference between the kavana of Shalei L'Shem Kodesh, or the Shini Kodesh, and the Shini Bailim. By Shini Bailim, the issue is that you have to bring the carbon as a kapara for the right bailim. Now, in all the different details of the avodah that you bring by a carbon, where's the kapara of the carbon? The kapara of the carbon is the zrika of the damot on the mizbeach, as we'll see later here in the Masechta. That's the main kapara of the carbon. So therefore, the kavana of Shalei Lishma, Shalei L'Shem Bailim, where's really the problem? Only by the zrika, when you're spraying the blood, Shalei L'Shem Bailim. Okay, we brought already before that even the shchita Shalei L'Shem Bailim is also a problem. So what this means is, yeah, it could be even by the shchita as well. But if you shechted it, thinking that I'm shechting this carbon if for the purpose of doing the zrika for someone else, then it's going to be a problem. But if he shechts the carbon Shalei L'Shem Bailim and he's just thinking to himself, I'm shechting for someone else, that's not an issue. It always has to be for the fact, by all 4 avodas, even if theoretically we'll say by all 4 avodas that there is a Shalei Lishma, which is Shalei L'Shem Bailim, but it's what? That I'm going to do the zrika for someone else, because that's the main kapara, the zrika. Right, it says, this is Inyan that's brought also in Chassidus, when to the zrika. The main kapara is the dam, which is the chayas of the behemah that's sprayed on the mizbeach, and you're giving it to the Eibishter. That's where the main kapara is. So therefore, it's that dafka over here where the shini bailim means that you're not being mechaper for this person. So therefore, by the shini kodesh, there's a bigger chumrah, because that's yeshnei ba'arba avodas. Over there, the Shalei Lishma is by all 4 avodas that I think that I'm going to do this, or I'm doing this for another carbon. And a third chumrah that I find by Shini Kodesh, the Yeshnoi La'achamisa. This psul of Shini Kodesh is even if the owner of the carbon died and his inheritors, a Yedish, his son is bringing this carbon, so you have to bring it l'shem this carbon, not l'shem another carbon. But the halacha of Shini Bailim doesn't apply here anymore because the Bailim is not alive anymore. A Yedish is bringing it. By a Yedish, this halacha of Shini Bailim does not apply. Another case where there's a difference, v'yeshnei b'tzibuk b'yachid. The halacha of Shini Kodesh applies whether it's a carbon yachid for an individual or a tzibur when you bring a carbon for all of Klal Yisrael. But by the halacha of Shini Bailim, that only applies by a carbon of an individual. Now, the Gemara clarifies regarding these 4 different svaras, these 4 different pirchas that we just brought, that not necessarily are all 4 pirchas valid. V'af al gav, although you may argue back, the tarti lav dafke. 2 of these pirchas that we just brought are not necessarily valid. But tarti miyadafke. But 2 of them are 100% valid pirchas. And the Gemara explains why 2 of these pirchas are not 100% valid. Because what was the first pircha we brought? That by Shini Kodesh there's a psul in the guf, and by Shini Bailim there's no psul in the guf of the carbon. So the Gemara says that's not necessarily so. Because Ma'ishna Shini Bailim do lo have a psule begufay. When you're thinking that I'm bringing it for a different person, there's no actual invalidation in the physical, anything physical in the carbon itself. It's machshava ba'alma. It's just a wrong thought that the person had. So Shini Kodesh Nami, if so, you could argue regarding the wrong machshava in the carbon, Shini Kodesh as well, machshava ba'almahu. They're both just a machshava. So it's not it's not a shini in the guf of the carbon, but nevertheless, what do we say? Even the achshava pasla. That machshava itself invalidates the carbon, or it invalidates for the owner that he has to bring now another carbon. So hachanami kivin da achshava pasla. By having the machshava of shini bailim, it causes an invalidation for this carbon itself. So from what the Gemara is saying here, it sounds like the Gemara is sort of concluding that both shini kaidesh and shini bailim will be considered to be a shini and a psul in the guf of the carbon, even though it's only a machshava. But that's the power of a kain when he brings the carbon with b'machshava. Or I mentioned before that there's a Rashi's opinion that it's not only machshava. We're talking all about dibur really. That has to also be expressed verbally, but it's considered to be a psul in the guf of the carbon by both of them. So therefore, this is not considered to be a chumre for the shini kaidesh more than the shini bailim.
Or both are not a shini.
Yeah, correct.
Or both are not a
or
shini.
both are not a shini in the guf. So there's a discussion in Mefarshim about this. That's why I'm bringing it up. Yeah. All Rav Pinchas berei Rav Mari. And then also, one of the other perches we said was that by shini bailim, that does not apply when the owner died, then now it's just a yiddish. But that's not necessarily so, because Rav Pinchas berei Rav Mari, he said, the Omar yesh shini bailim la'acha misa. Even after the owner passed away, and now the yiddish is bringing it, you still have to bring it for this one that's bringing the carbon, and not for someone else. Later we'll discuss this. So according to him, that perche is also not a perche. But tarti mi'ekel mifrach. However, there are still two pirches that we mentioned before that are still valid, and therefore the point is you can't compare the halachas of shaloi l'shma regarding shini kaidesh and say that the same applies for shini bailim. So therefore, so far we only have a source for shini bailim by the shchita. Where is the source for the other avodas? So Elam Rav Ashi says, Omakra, the pasuk says that v'nirtza loy lechaper olav. You bring the carbon, it should be a kapara for him. Olav. It says loy and then it says olav. What does this mean? V'loy al chavera. It has to be for him, meaning the kavana l'shma for this person and not for someone else. Okay, so from here you see this v'nirtza. What is it talking about? This zrike, as I mentioned before, l'chaper. The main kapara is the zrike. So this is the source that the zrike has to be l'shem this bailam. But does this pasuk come to teach that the zrika should be l'shem the bailim? But from this pasuk we learn out something else. Look at the Tanya, as it says in the Braise, Olav, Rab Shimon, Oimer, Rab Shimon says, Es she'olav chayev b'achri yusay. When it's a carbon that you took it upon yourself with this term of harei alai. Right, as we learned already before, there's two kinds of karbanis, a neder and an adava. A neder is when a person says harei alai. And then even if something gets invalidated or gets lost, it's still your responsibility to make sure the carbon is brought again. And then there's harei zu, that you're being makdish this one, and if it's not brought, then you're not responsible. So when it says here, what it's saying is that if you took it upon yourself with the term harei alai chayev b'achri yusay, it'll be your responsibility to bring a carbon even if it got lost or it died. But if you didn't take it upon yourself, it's just harei zu, then it's not going to be your responsibility if something happens to the carbon. Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi explained, my time, what's the reason for this distinction? Kiven da'amar alai, when you say for a carbon that I take it upon myself, command the ton le akasfe. It's like you're carrying it on your shoulders. It's your personal obligation for this. It's not just this carbon that is sanctified that has to be brought. And if this one is lost, then there's nothing to do with you anymore. No, it's like you're carrying it on your shoulders. So therefore, you see over here that this pasuk alav is used for this drasha. So how are we learning it from here? Allah v'loy al chavera regarding the kavana of shalei l'shem bailim for this rike. So the Gemara explains there's a second drasha in this pasuk because Rav Ashi mivnirtza loy l'chaper kama. It's not only the word olav which is extra; it says also loy. Because it says v'nirtza l'chaper, you spray the blood and it's machaper. It says loy. That loy is saying has to be l'shem this owner and not for someone else. Zok the Gemara ashkechan zviche uzrike. So I have a source for the zvicha of the carbon, the shechting, and the spraying of the blood. Kabbalah minalam. But what's the source to say that the same would apply also to the kabbalah of the blood as well, that it has to be l'shem the bailim? So if you'll argue and say, leiluf mizvicha, uzrike, let's learn out from this that I see that the shechita and the zrika of the carbon have to be l'shem bailim. But you can't, because there's a unique stringency regarding both of these together. Ma l'zvicha o zrike, by both of these, by the shechita and by the zrike, shekain avodah shechayavin aleh bachutz. They are both avodas that if this is done outside of the Beis Hamikdash, this is the isser of shechting mechutz lamachne shechitas chutz. In both of them, the isser of shechting outside or spraying outside applies. but it does not apply regarding Makabel the Dam. A person that's Makabel Dam of a carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash, for that he's potter of Kodesh. So you can't learn out from Shechita and Zrika, has this stringency. So hello, Ravashi. So therefore Ravashi says, where do I learn out for the Kabbalah of the Dam? Asya me'ayil nazir. I learn it out from the pasuk by the carbon of a nazir that brings the carbon. The chsiv there, the pasuk says, "V'sa ayil yase zevach shlomim," and he brings this ayil as a zevach shlomim. So the word zevach here is extra. What does it mean to say? Shetehei asiyasoi, or actually the Gemara is darshaning yase. That is not the word zevach. Sorry, it's darshaning the words yase. So it's telling you that the asiyasoi l'shem shlomim, that the asiya of this, which is including not just the zviche and the zrike, that we already learned out before, but here it's saying the asiya. The asiya of this will be has to be l'shem shlomim. Now the asiya includes the additional avodas, which would be the Kabbalah and the halacha as well, has to be for the sake of the shlomim. Now here we also have to say v'im einoi inyan l'shini kaidesh. Simply it would mean that it has to be l'shem the shlomim and not l'shem another carbon. But for that we don't need this drasha, because the nafkalemi hasam, we already learned that on Omer Aleph. For this that it has to be l'shem this carbon and not l'shem another carbon. So tenayu inyan l'shini bailim. So from this yaseh for the shlomim, it's saying this halacha of shini bailim that it applies by the other two avodas, by the Kabbalah and the halacha.
You don't have both from them?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, asiya. That's what it says. It says the term asiya, so it goes on both of them. But the Gemara here asks on this drasha. So Ravacha bar Abba asks Rav, maybe I would shadarshan the pasuk differently. Yase, when the pasuk says v'sa'ayil yase, you should do. That's a klal. That's coming to say a klal, because it's a general term referring to all the asiyas of the carbon. And that's saying that all of it has to be done l'shem the shlomim. And then when it says zevach means the shchita. Maybe that's a prat. That's a detail only referring to shchita. Klal prat. So the rule is whenever the Torah writes something in a general term and then it writes a detail, so we say emachal elamashe befrat. That now the Torah is spelling out that we only apply it to this detail. That means zvichein midachrini loy. Maybe the Torah here is coming to teach that only the shechita has to be done l'shem this carbon, l'shem the shlomim, or this carbon for the nazir, the shlomim by the nazir, and not for something else. Maybe that's what it's coming to teach. Says the Gemara loy. That can't be the drasha because it doesn't fit into the language of the pasuk to be considered a klal uprat. Why not? Because iksiv yase shlomim zevach. If the order of the pasuk would be yase shlomim, that would be the klal, and then zevach, which would be the shchita, would be the prat. Then what you would say, what you suggested would be true, that it's saying that the lishma applies here only by the shchita. But hashta now the chsiv yase zevach. It says the word yase, and then it says zevach. And then it says shlomim afterwards. So this is different. And havelei klal she'enai mole. This is a klal which is an incomplete klal, because it's the term shlomim that is really supposed to complete the word yase. Yase what? What am I doing, b'chlal? It's supposed, really the klal itself is incomplete. It's supposed to say yase shlomim. So that's the general thing that you're making the shlomim. And then zevach, the detail of the shlomim. The Torah writes the word shlomim afterwards, and it doesn't complete the klal itself, because it wants you to understand, don't darshan this as the klal prat. And that's the rule. When the Torah writes the klal incomplete, the rule is v'chol klal she'enei moli. If the Torah did not complete the klal itself, ein done an isa b'klal prat. We can't darshan this as a klal prat. So therefore over here, we darshan it differently. We darshan it like the Gemara is saying before, that yaseh is coming to say that all the asiyas should be done l'shem shlomim, and then we say v'im eina inyan, that it's coming to teach regarding the kavanah that it should be for this bailam. Ravina says that la'olam done it. No, the emes is that we could darshan this pasuk as a klal uprat. However, it's not just a klal uprat; it's a klal uprat uklal. Why? How is it a klal uprat uklal? Because in the pasuk it actually goes on to say, it says v'sa'ayil yas zevach shlomim, and then it says lashem. So v'lashem chazav v'kolal. You're doing for the Eivish's sake. That's another klal again. So this is a klal uprat, a klal over here. That's what we're learning out from this pasuk. Now the Gemara is going to spell out exactly what is the klal of prat klal. We're looking to learn from here regarding all the other asiyas, including for the Kabbalah and the Halacha, that has to be done l'shma, and to say that it goes on l'shem bailim. So exactly what the klal of prat klal is, here the Gemara is going to spell out in a moment, but first the Gemara questions this whole klal of prat klal. Is this actually a valid klal of prat klal? Ravachem asks Ravina on this kind of a klal of prat klal. But the problem is here, you can't compare klola kama, the first klal that the pasuk writes, the klola basra, to the second klal that it writes. Why not? Because klola kama, when it writes the first klal, marbe asiyas, what is it writing? The pasuk says v'sa'al yase zevach shlomim. So it's coming to include the asiyas of the carbon itself, which are the 4 stages. When you bring the carbon until the shchita, until the zrika of the dam, v'sulai. And that klal doesn't include more than that. However, klola basra, when it says the second klal, after it says zevach shlomim is the prat, only the shchita. But then it says lashem, that's the second klal of lashem, kol lashem. That actually includes even things that are after the main asiyas of the carbon. The main asiyas of the carbon are only until the zrika of the blood on the mizbeach. But when it says lashem, that means everything that it follows even afterwards for the Eibishter's sake. And that would mean vafilu shvichas shirayim, even the remnants of the blood that are then poured out by the foundation of the mizbeach, and that they're not even ma'akab the kapara. It's not part of the asiyah of the carbon. And also v'haktores emurin, and then the pieces of the carbon that are burnt on the mizbeach, that they would also have to be done l'shma. So the first klal is one kind of a klal. The second klal is a different kind of a klal. So this doesn't qualify for a klal of prat klal. So the Gemara answers to this. Ravina answers no. Actually, there's an opinion that it doesn't qualify. Hatana de Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel is taught by Rabbi Shmuel beklal yuprati regarding when you darshan a klal prat, the darish kahai gavna, or darish kahai, he does darshan in this kind of a klal prat klal. Again, darish kahai gavna klal prat klal. Now iatadon elo ke'en aprat. So now the Gemara explains exactly what this klal prat klal is. By every klal prat klal, you say that if the Torah would write only a klal of prat, then I would say that the prat is spelling out exactly what the klal is, and it's only specifically what the prat is. When the Torah adds another klal, then I say that it only has to be ke'ena prat, similar to the prat, but not only the prat itself. So what is this similar to the prat? Ma prat, mefurish, aveda. The prat is speaking about something which is an aveda, the shchita, which is an aveda, ube'inan lishma, and it has to be done lishma, af kol aveda, ube'inan lishma. So I learn from here also that all the Avedis, the main Avedis of the carbon, the 4 main Avedis, all have to be done Lishma. And therefore I apply this to say for the din of Shini Bailim, because the din of Shini Kaidish we know already. So what I'm learning out of this Klal Prat Klal, that for any Aveda, it has to be done Lishma, including the Shma of Shini Bailim. Okay, but the Gemara asks, I could darshan this klal of prat klal in a way that it won't apply to all the avedis that we're looking for a source here, because I would say ima prat mefurish aveda. This is a kind of a prat. What's the prat? It's the shchita. That's an aveda, yes, but also which type of aveda? V'chayaven aleh bachutz. It's a kind of aveda that you chayiv to bring the carbon. You chayiv, that is. Sorry, you chayiv kodesh, that is, if you brought this carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So I would say av kol aveda v'chayaven aleh bachutz. That it's only applying to a kind of Aveda that if you do it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you chayiv kares for this. So that would mean Shchita uzrike in. Shchita and Zrike is included because those are the Avedas that you chayiv kares if you do it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. But Kabbalah v'haylach eloi. But the other two that we're still looking for a source regarding Shini Bailim, which is receiving the blood and bringing the blood to the Mizbeach, they're not included because they're not Ke'ena Prat. If they're brought outside the Beis Hamikdash, there's no kares for that. Okay, that's one option, how to learn this klal of prat klal. But now the Gemara says, however, there's another way to how to explain this ke'en aprat. In what aspect do we say that has to be similar to the prat? Yinami, I can tell you as follows. Ma ha-prat mefurish, the prat is the shechting. So just like the shechting of the carbon, what are we spelling out? It's something, davar haton tzofen. This is something that's done on the tzofen of the mizbeach. The yeshnon b'chatois, apnimiyos, and this applies also to karbanis that are brought inside the Beis Hamikdash. Af kol haton tzofen, the yeshnon b'chatois apnimiyos. So too, anything that is by the tzofen of the mizbeach, and it also is applicable by karbanis that are brought inside the Beis Hamikdash, that this halacha of lishma should apply to it. So therefore I would say, what's included in this? What are we learning out over here from the Ke'ena Prat? Shchite v'Kabbalah in. So that would include Shchite and the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is not only Kabbalah, but it's also the Halacha. That's the same as this. But Zrika loy. Zrika is not included because the Zrika is not on the tzafon of the Mizbeach. The Zrika, there's no halacha of tzafon regarding that, and it's not the Zrika. We're talking about the Zrika on the outside Mizbeach, and it's not shaykh to the inside Mizbeach. So maybe Zrika I should not learn out from here. So if we're going to learn the Ke'ena Prat this way, so then we're going to learn out from here the Kabbalah and the Halacha. So we have basically two ways how to learn the Ke'ena Prat. Should I focus on the Chumrah, on the detail of the Ke'ena Prat, that this is something that's chayav kares outside, then it would be only for Shchita Zrika? Or should I say that the Ke'ena Prat is these two Chumras here of Tzafain, and that the blood is brought inside, and then it would include the Kabbalah and the Halacha? So the Gemara says an interesting thing. In such a case where we don't know how to say the Klal, Prat, the Klal, so Ikla Mahachi, Ve'ikla Mahachi. I could learn it out this way, or I could learn it out that way. The Ke'ena Prat could be either one. So Shkulin Hay. So both of these details of Ke'ena Prat are equal. There's no reason to go one way or the other. So V'yavayu Shneyem. I learn out the Ke'ena Prat, both of them. The point that it's similar to the Ke'ena Prat that includes Zrike, and in the svara of being Ke'ena Prat regarding the Bachutz, and also the Ke'ena Prat, which will include the Kabbalah and Halachas. I can learn both out from here. So this is the source to say for everything, for the Zrike, for the Kabbalah, for the Halacha, that it all has to be Ke'ena Prat. If it's Ke'ena Prat, then I say that this halacha of Shalei Lishma applies. And what does this apply to? For Eina Inyan, that it goes on Shini Bailam. That's how I know Shini Bailam by everything. Lishna Achrinet, another lashon how this point that we just said was said about this, that v'chode teiku b'milsa, or the other gears over here is shkoil shakul, who that is. These two ways of how to learn out this Ke'ena Prat are both equal. And v'chol chode v'chode. Any time when you have one option and another option, how to learn out the Ke'ena Prat, so take a b'milsa. It stays in its place, meaning the same point like the first lashon. We learn out both of the limudim of the Ke'ena Prat. Okay, it's just another language of how to say the same point basically. Ibay Seime, or the Gemara says that no, I learn actually the Ke'ena Prat only regarding Kabbalah and Halacha, as that suggestion that the Ke'ena Prat is only that, but not Zrika though. Now Zrika, how do I know that the Zrika has to be done? L'shem Bailim mit Ravashi nafke. That's already learned out from the point that Ravashi brought before. It's learned from the pasuk v'nirtzaloi l'chaperolo. For that, for the Zrika, we're really not even looking for a source now. We already had that pasuk before v'nirtzaloi l'chaperolo that has to be done l'shem the Bailim. Okay, but now the Gemara still argues Ashkechon Ayil Nazir. The source, the pasuk that we're bringing for the Kabbalah and the Halacha, and maybe even for the Zrika as well, that has to be done l'shem Bailim. What's our source? This pasuk by the Ayil of the Nazir. Shar Shlomim Minayin. How do I know that this applies by any kind of Shlomim as well? V'chitem and nail of Me'al Nazir. If you would say, if you find it by the carbon of the Nazir, I should learn it out to a regular Shlomim as well. But I can argue and say, no, Ma'al Nazir, there's a certain Chumrah by the carbon of a Nazir. Sheken yesh imay damim acherim. A Nazir doesn't just bring this one carbon, this ayal, he brings other carbonas as well with it. So I see there's a chatas and oil as well. So I see there's a unique stringency for the carbon of a Nazir. Says the Gemara, but imkei nichtoiv shlomov. The pasuk, if it would want to say that this is only by the ayal of a Nazir, it would say v'sa ayal yasa zevach shlomov. Only his shlomim. My shlomim. Why does he use the term shlomim? L'rabbis kol shlomim. So that means by any carbon shlomim, you have to bring the carbon with the kavana of the shma for this bailam and not for someone else. But says the Gemara, Ashkechon Shlomim. Okay, so I know that it refers to every Shlomim. Shar kol kachim in alam. What is the source to say that I apply this by any other karbanis as well? Now, if you'll argue to say Neilif Mishlomim, I compare the other karbanis that you need Lishma just like the Shlomim. But I can answer you, Mal Shlomim, by Shlomim, there's unique halachas that apply only there, and therefore it's stringent. Shekain, Tu'un, and Smicha. There's the halacha of Smicha, you have to lean your hands on it. Nesachim, there's the libations, there's the wine that's poured in the Mizbeach, Tnufas, Chazav V'shoik, and then the Chazav Shoik, sections of the animal that have to be lifted by the Kayin, and not necessarily do you find this by other karbanis. Like Rashi brings, B'chai, Meiser, Pesach, you don't find this, so how do you know that over there it has to be Lishma? Ela Omakra, the source to compare to the other karbanis is, the pasuk says, Zay Satayra La'ayla Lamincha V'Lachatas V'La'asham V'Lamiluim V'Lezevach Hashlamim. This is the halachas, and it includes in this pasuk all the various kinds of karbanis. Hikisha Nakasav, the Taira is comparing L'Shlamim, to the carbon Shlamim. Ma Shlamim, just like by the Shlamim we see, Bein Shini Kaidesh, Bein Shini Bailim. Both of these details, that you have to bring it for the right carbon and for the right owner, being Lishma. Afkal, so too by the other karbanis, Bein Shini Kaidesh, Bein Shini Bailim, Lishma. Has to be brought for the right owner. Okay, let's just see the conclusion of the Indian here. So now the Gemara says, Eime, I would say, Heiche de Shachet Luhu Shalei Lishma. So maybe now, after all of this, we brought the sources for all four Avedis. That has to be Lishma, for this carbon, and for the right owner. I should say that if you shechted it Shalei Lishma, live Salu. Maybe that should invalidate the carbon itself, and not only like the Mishnah said, that this is all just L'chatchila, but b'di'evet, the carbon itself remains kosher. It's just that the owner is going to have to bring a different carbon. How do I know that? The answer is, Amakra, the pasuk said, the Gemara brought this already before, Maitzis v'secha tishmar, you should keep what you say out of your mouth, Vaisisa kashena darta, and you should do what your vow was. And the pasuk in the beginning here uses this term of a neder, but then in the continuation of the pasuk it goes on to say that this is nedava. Nedava shadibar. So how does it say nedava? So high nedava, the pasuk goes on to say that it's a nedava nederu. It's a neder, and as we said before, neder and nedava is not the same thing. So Ella, what it's saying is, im kamosha nedarta sisa yehei neder. If you brought it as a neder and the carbon was brought fully lishma, so then that will be the fulfillment of your neder, and you won't have to bring another carbon. Vadvim lav, if the kohen had the wrong kavana l'shalei lishma, then yehein nedava. So that the carbon itself is not invalidated. The carbon itself will not just be a nedava; it has to be brought, but the person himself will have to bring a different carbon because he didn't fulfill his vow. So you see over here that it's only a psul for the person's chiyuv, not for the carbon itself. Okay, now the Gemara concludes, v'itztrech maitzis v'secha. We need this pasuk here that teaches maitzis v'secha, that for the person it won't be l'shem, he won't be yotzei chiv if it's shalei l'shma, and the itzrich zeis hatayre, and we need also this pasuk that we brought here, zeis hatayre, that teaches the halachas of shalei l'shma regarding all the karbanis and with all the drushes that we brought before. Because Rachmana might say, if we would only say this pasuk about the person that he was not yotzei chiv, so then hava mineh, or the Bachir says hava mineh lo yedayne b'mai. I would not know in what details regarding which of the Avedis this applies, the Shalei Lishma. I wouldn't have all these Lumudim to know regarding the Shalei Lishma, regarding the four Avedis with all the sources that we brought. So therefore, Kasar Rahman is Zeis HaTeireh, that we have all the drashes before, with the drash of Zeis HaTeireh, that says that we learn from Shlamim to all the other Karbanis regarding the Shalei Lishma and all the details of the Avedis. Now, if he Kasar Rahman is Zeis HaTeireh, what if we would have only the drash of Zeis HaTeireh, Avamina Livsalu? I would think that if it's Shalei Lishma, it would actually invalidate the carbon itself. Kasar Rahman Maitzis Vasecha, so the Torah writes Maitzis Vasecha, that it's still going to be an Adav. Even if it was brought Shalei Lishma, it's only for the Bailam that it's not going to work, but the carbon itself is still valid.